What happens when the sharpest mind in basketball meets the longest arms the game has ever known? How do you describe a night where art collided with defense, where a man who painted shots with surgical precision met a towering figure who seemed built to erase them? The 27th of January, 1988 wasn't just a game. It was a study in contrast, a meeting of extremes. On one side stood Larry Bird, the embodiment of basketball intelligence and effort, a man who once said,
I guarantee you I'll give 100% every time I come out, and if I get a torn toenail or something, I won't sit out. I'll play as hard as I can every night, and I hope I can bring excitement to the fans, and I'll never give up.
He wasn't flashy, he wasn't fast, but he was relentless and deadly. And across from him was Manute Bol, a 7'7" enigma who turned layups into prayers, whose very presence changed the geometry of the court. That night at Boston Garden, instinct met intimidation. Precision faced disruption. And the question wasn't just who would win, but who would bend reality to their will. Larry Bird was never the fastest, never the highest leaper, never the most physically gifted man on the floor. But he was always the most dangerous. A self-proclaimed hick from French Lick. Born in a small Indiana town and raised with nothing but grit, repetition, and an old hoop nailed to a shed, Bird transformed himself from rural mystery into the mind and soul of the Boston Celtics. A three-time NBA champion, a three-time MVP, a two-time Finals MVP. The accolades were undeniable, but Bird was never just stats. He was basketball distilled to its rawest, most ruthless form. Selfless, silent, surgical, cold like the New England wind, deadly like the flick of his wrist. He didn't rely on speed, he didn't need verticality, he didn't wear his swagger on his sleeve. What he had was even harder to stop. Anticipation, just one glance, one read, and suddenly, your defense, your rotations, your switches, your double teams meant nothing. He once told a defender exactly where he would shoot from, walked to that spot, took the shot, and buried it without blinking. He was a trash talker, yes, but never loud. His confidence was quiet, inevitable, the kind that makes you second-guess yourself before the play even starts. NBA legend Dominique Wilkins once recalled the eerie chill of facing Bird in the Garden.
This is, mystique of the Boston Garden. And I remember the first, we was at the jump circle, and I go shake Larry Bird's hand. He put both hands behind his back.
He wasn't just playing you, he was playing your psyche. Larry didn't play games. He played mind games. With a ball, a screen, and a plan, he could break you, dissect you, and leave you staring at the scoreboard wondering what had just happened and why it felt so quiet. And then there was Manute. If Larry Bird was the ghost in your mind, Manute Bol was the ghost in the lane. At 7 feet 7 inches, he remains the tallest player in NBA history. But he didn't just stand tall, he hovered like a myth, a walking wingspan, a silhouette so long and strange that it seemed to bend the court. Watching him emerge from the bench felt like watching a shadow stretch across the hardwood.
Look at those legs, will you? My goodness, are they long.
One commentator gasped in disbelief as Bol glided into the frame, his legs impossibly long, almost inhuman. But Manute didn't move like a typical big man. He wasn't built for strength or explosion. He didn't play above the rim, because he didn't need to jump. He simply existed like a statue with arms, like a monument in motion.
You watch how high up he goes. Not that far, about 2 inches.
He had more career blocks than points, an impossible stat line that reads like a fable, but is entirely real. He wasn't there to score. He was there to erase. Jumpers? He'd block them from 12 feet away. Floaters? Swatted like flies. Layups? Most never even happened. Players turned mid-air, trying to escape his reach before it arrived. He didn't just protect the rim. He turned the entire paint into a place players feared to enter. Opposing teams bent their offenses away from him, not out of respect, but out of survival. When Manute stood in the lane, he wasn't just another center. He was a myth in uniform. Something that shouldn't exist, but did. Clash of forces. And so the question emerged. What happens when an unstoppable mind meets an unreachable reach? When basketball's most intellectual assassin walks into the long shadow cast by the league's longest arms? Larry Bird, the master of anticipation, of feel, of angles you didn't know existed, versus Manute Bol, a towering paradox, raw, rigid, but capable of erasing everything within his orbit. Bird didn't just run plays, he read them 3 moves ahead, like a grandmaster thinking in layers. Bol didn't just block shots, he deleted them from the timeline, like they were never there. One manipulated time, the other manipulated space. One played like a scalpel, quiet, sharp, surgical. The other loomed like a skyscraper, immovable, impassable, absolute. This wasn't just offense versus defense. This was something deeper. A clash of philosophies, a war between touch and height, between genius and geometry, between the known and the unreachable. Bird ruled the subtle, Bol ruled the visible. And on the 27th of January, 1988, inside the creaking rafters of the Boston Garden, the old wood floor would become their battleground. Their dialogue, their canvas, 2 men, 2 systems, 2 realities colliding under one roof. So, let's go to the Garden and witness what happens when mind meets wingspan. The Celtics stepped onto the floor like a well-rehearsed orchestra, their movements smooth, synchronized, humming with certainty. But the baton, the rhythm, the tempo, the soul of the song belonged to one man. And the first note? It came from Larry. From the opening possession, you could feel it. This wasn't just basketball. It was a symphony, and Bird wasn't playing in it. He was conducting it. He curled off a Robert Parrish screen, with the kind of precision that only comes from 1,000 repetitions, both in practice and in dreams. The defenders collapsed, momentarily disoriented by the sharpness of the motion. But Bird? He didn't even glance at the rim. One bounce pass. Perfect timing. Easy dunk. He wasn't scoring. He was establishing order. Moments later, a loose ball ricocheted into open space near the baseline, headed straight for Moses Malone, the mountain of muscle who defined dominance in the post. Any other man might have hesitated. Not Larry. He saw it before it happened, broke into motion, snatched the ball from Moses's reach, like a magician taking a coin from behind your ear, and glided the other way, one long stride, one soft finish, one simple layup. No celebration, no snarl, just another note played in perfect time. This wasn't flash. It wasn't ego. This was Bird's warm-up. And then, the masterpiece began, stroke by stroke. He flowed into the offense like ink across parchment, smooth, uninterrupted, permanent. No wasted motion, no excess, only intention. A sharp cut back off a ghost screen, the kind that leaves defenders chasing phantoms. A mid-range pull-up off one foot, no balance, no square footing, still money. A floating leaner off the baseline, flicked effortlessly over a lunging contest. A classic fadeaway from the elbow, the glass catching the ball like it was magnetized. A transition jumper, caught mid-stride, feet barely set, and it never touched the rim. Each shot had a different voice. Each moment was composed in real time, with Bird playing jazz while everyone else stuck to sheet music. He wasn't repeating himself. He wasn't just scoring points, he was telling a story. Each release had its own arc, its own signature. They weren't lucky. They were engineered. He went 10 for 10 from the field in that first quarter, tacked on 2 free throws. 22 points.
22 points for Larry Bird. He hasn't missed here tonight. 11 of 11. 2:51 to go in the first. Celtics 5 of 11.
Commentator, stunned into reverence.
You can see Bird is still on the floor. He has 22, and he's got a lot of time to break that record. 2 minutes, 49 seconds.
When the horn sounded, Bird didn't strut to the bench. He didn't raise a fist or beat his chest. He walked off like he always did. Perfect, unhurried, untouchable. Not one wasted dribble, not one wasted breath. Let's make something clear. The Washington Bullets weren't playing bad defense. They were hustling. They were contesting. They were doing everything right technically. But that's what made it worse. Because the issue wasn't physical. It was philosophical. Larry Bird wasn't playing the same game. He wasn't reacting. He was predicting. He moved like he'd already watched the film. Like every pass, every hedge, every rotation had already played out in his mind long before it happened on the hardwood. He floated between spots. He wasn't open because he was faster. He was open because he was earlier. Washington was constantly a step behind, not because they weren't prepared, but because Bird was already gone by the time they arrived. They weren't guarding a man. They were chasing his imagination, trying to defend someone who wasn't attacking you with force, but with foresight. Someone who could feel your weight shifting before you even moved. Who punished your decisions before you'd made them. He wasn't erupting. He was orchestrating. And the court bent to his rhythm like string sections rise and fall beneath the hands of a conductor. Even when he didn't have the ball, you could feel the air shift, because the threat of Bird was often more dangerous than the ball itself. That first quarter wasn't a highlight reel. It wasn't a hot streak. It was a masterclass in control. Every dribble was intentional. Every cut was surgical. Every shot a sentence in a language only he spoke. And the worst part for Washington? He was just getting started. And then, the temperature shifted. You could feel it not in any stat line or scoreboard, but in the silence between possessions. In the way the Boston Garden crowd leaned forward, in how the players repositioned subtly, instinctively, like prey sensing a new predator. Even the hardwood itself seemed to tighten beneath their feet.
Manute Bol is going to be coming in. Next whistle.
The tallest player the NBA had ever known, 7 feet, 7 inches of quiet disruption, a figure less like a man and more like a monument. He didn't just block shots, he blocked ideas. He didn't just alter the paint, he altered the perimeter of human confidence. Bol stepped onto the floor like a storm cloud rolling in over a still city. Not fast, but total. A shadow falling across the court, and instantly, everything changed. The Celtics' offense, which had just minutes ago looked like choreography cuts crisp, motion smooth, execution free-flowing, now stuttered, just slightly. Just enough to tell the story. On the first possession after Bol's arrival, Artis Gilmore caught the ball deep in the post, a routine seal, a standard touch, until he looked up and saw Bol, waiting, watching, not even moving. Gilmore hesitated. Not long, just a beat. But that beat was enough to rupture the rhythm, enough to freeze the timing, enough for the whistle. 3-second violation. Bol hadn't jumped, hadn't blocked, hadn't spoken. He simply stood there. And that was enough. Suddenly, the floor looked smaller. Straight line drives bent into loops. Aggressive cuts curled into caution. What was once instinct became math. Dribble penetration slowed. Passes became tentative. Angles were no longer natural, they were negotiated. The Celtics weren't panicked yet, but they were no longer free. Because in the middle of the floor now stood something unmapped. Something you couldn't just outmuscle or outrun. Something that didn't just stand tall, it stood long. Longer than arms should go. Longer than plays should last. Longer than doubt. It wasn't just a man. It was a presence. A disruption. A wall. But then, Bird was Bird. And yet Larry Bird did not blink. While teammates glanced over shoulders, Bird studied the terrain. While movements froze, he adjusted. Where others saw obstacles, he saw outlines. He didn't challenge the wall. He didn't try to tear down the castle. He rewrote the map. On the very next possession, he curled around the top of the key, moving with that now familiar efficiency. No extra steps, no hesitation, just geometry in motion. One plant, one pop, catch, release, swish. He didn't need to drive, didn't need to leap, didn't need to test the clouds. A few trips later, Boston ran a classic floppy, set a maze of screens in misdirection designed to create space where there should be none. Bird slid through it like smoke. He caught it on the wing off balance, defender trailing. Rose. Released. Hit. Clean. No wasted motion. No dramatic follow-through. Just control. And still, he never looked at Bol, because he didn't need to. While others saw Bol as a wall to confront, Bird treated him like a fixed landmark. Something to work around, not through. He didn't beat the monster by attacking it head-on. He didn't swing a sword or call the crowd to arms. He beat the monster by never walking through the gate. He refused the premise of fear, refused the architecture of intimidation. He didn't overcome the presence in the paint, he bypassed it altogether. Bol was a wall, but Bird was water, and water always finds a way. In that moment, Bird reminded everyone why he was different, why he was more than a shooter, more than a scorer. He was a strategist, a surgeon, a composer. Where others played with muscle, Bird played with map and compass. And while Bol altered shots, Bird altered reality. The second half began not with rhythm but with resistance. Manute Bol, the 7'7" wall of limbs and deflections, had awakened. He erased a Robert Parrish dunk, meeting it midair with a reach that seemed to stretch into the rafters. Moments later, he swatted a McHale floater with the grace of a man brushing dust from his shoulder. His presence, once ceremonial, was now real, tangible, and terrifying. The Bullets felt it. The crowd felt it. Even Boston seemed to flinch just slightly. But Larry Bird? He didn't flinch. He pivoted into the post, dragging Jeff Malone down with him like an anchor dragging into still waters. One bump, two dribbles. He turned over his right shoulder off balance, fading forward and floated it high over the help defender. The ball kissed glass, dropped through, and the whistle blew. And one. The Garden rose again. Next play, midcourt chaos. A lazy dribble. A moment's hesitation. Bird was there. He read it a heartbeat early, poked the ball loose with surgical precision, and sprinted up the court like a man possessed, not fast, but inevitable. He dished it, kept running, got it back, and flipped it high off the glass with Bol's shadow lunging behind him like a tidal wave. Too late. He wasn't dunking. He was dissecting. Bol brought size, but Bird brought something deeper. Control, timing, angles. The Bullets were closing the gap, momentum tilted, bodies flew, arms flailed. But Bird, he only got faster. Sharper. He zipped a no-look bounce pass between two defenders, splitting their legs like he'd seen it in slow motion. He drilled a catch, and fired three off a broken screen, his feet crooked but his aim flawless. He leaned into a fall-away jumper, released it mid-drift, and turned away before it even landed. Each possession felt like a chess puzzle. Bird, always 2 moves ahead. Each shot came quicker. H passed tighter. H second. His. Bol was inches. Bird was decisions. One was vertical. The other was inevitable. Bol may have altered the air. But Bird? He rearranged time. 4th quarter. Time was winding down. But for Larry Bird, the game was still opening up. He was deep in rhythm now, beyond locked in. His movements were economical. His reads instantaneous. It wasn't momentum. It was mastery. He caught the ball just inside the 3-point arc. No pump fake, no dribble, no wasted thought. Just a flick of the wrist. Swish. 44 points. And with that shot, Bird had officially scored more than the rest of the Celtics combined. He didn't raise a fist. He didn't scream to the rafters.
Once you win the championship, you sort of lay back a little bit and let everybody come to you instead of taking it to them again.
He didn't celebrate. He didn't smirk. He turned away coldly. His face was carved from stone, his eyes calm and calculating, his gaze scanning the arena like one who had seen it all. No fanfare, no fear, just focus. But the Bullets weren't done. With 2 minutes left, they launched one final counterpunch. Manute Bol, who had spent most of the night being outmaneuvered by Bird's footwork and timing, rose with fury. He met Darren Day at the rim and spiked his layup into the 3rd row. The crowd gasped. It wasn't a block. It was a rejection of the entire play. Moments later, Bol stepped to the free throw line. 7 feet, 7 inches. Arms like sails. Fingers twitching. He knocked down both. 104. 102. 2-point game. Boston Garden went quiet, not in fear, but in uncertainty. Could this giant, a figure more myth than man, actually tilt the game? Could the skyscraper conquer the floor general? But if there was pressure, Bird didn't feel it. No timeouts, no huddle, just instinct. On the next possession, he floated to the wing, catching the ball on the move smooth, silent, inevitable. The defense jumped. A double team flew at him desperate. Too late. Bird never panicked. He saw it coming before they did. One bounce pass. On a string. Right between defenders. Robert Parrish, waiting like a hammer behind glass, caught it in stride and rose up. Slam. That was the dagger. 106-100. The scoreboard flashed. The buzzer neared. But the real conclusion had come seconds earlier, in the space between Bird's decision and Parrish's dunk. There were no roars from Bird, no gestures to the crowd, just a nod, just sweat, just silence. Because the final statement had already been made. Ball changed shots. Bird changed outcomes. Bol brought wingspan. Bird brought vision. Bol altered space. Bird altered time. And in the end, no amount of height could outmatch inevitability. Manute Bol changed the court, but Larry Bird changed the terms. Bol made the paint a place of denial, a fortress of limbs and timing. He turned layups into prayers, dunks into regrets. He made big men hesitate and guards second guess. But Bird, he made the paint irrelevant. He didn't challenge Bol at the rim. He didn't try to outleap or outmuscle him. He simply rerouted the game, pulling the battle into places Bol couldn't reach. Mid-range pockets, subtle angles, silent cuts. Decisions made a full second before the defense even realized they were in checkmate. On a night when fear stood tall, Bird played wide. When arms flailed and chaos swelled, he flowed quietly, relentlessly, completely in control. When the pace turned frantic, Bird didn't chase it, he set it. He never dunked on Bol. He never stared him down. He beat him by refusing to play the same game. And that's what made Larry Bird the boss. Not because he jumped higher, not because he ran faster, but because he understood something deeper. That greatness isn't about reacting, it's about dictating. That the court bends to the player who knows how to slow time, manipulate space, and reshape the moment into something only he can see. And on that night, no matter how tall the man in front of him stood, even if he was 7 feet 7 inches of shot blocking defiance, Larry Bird stood taller. If you like this video, don't forget to press the subscribe Amazing Hoops button and ring the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos from our channel. Please leave your comments and suggestions below in the comments section, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. This action also contributes to motivating us to work even more diligently. Have a great day.